Bienvenidos and welcome to a new segment called LA Barrio Stories, and you can find it on Latino USA TV. If you download the app and click it, you will see all these beautiful stories about our community. As you well know, on LA Barrio Stories, our goal is to tell stories about our community through our lens, through our eyes, our struggle, our culture, our language, and we are here to promote that it's a beautiful culture. Isn't that right?
Most beautiful culture in the world.
And today, my guest is Dr. Darline Robles, a trailblazing Chicana in education. She was the first Chicana to be a superintendent, has paved the way for others, and continues to mentor many young professionals coming up. She's currently a USC professor, but was most recently LA County School Superintendent. And she also grew up here in Boyle Heights and East Los, right?
Absolutely, and even attended East LA College, where we are today.
Good. So welcome. Tell us about your family, Darlene, and where you grew up and how that impacted you with all these lives you've touched over the years.
Thank you for the question, because as we all know in our culture, family is so important. I was very fortunate to live in a family where I had both my grandparents from Mexico and also from Arizona and New Mexico, and they moved here to California. And I grew up with a single mother, but very committed to her two children, my brother and me. We grew up in Boyle Heights, East Los Angeles. And what I remember the most about growing up in this area was the multiracial community that I lived in. People that didn't grow up in East LA and Boyle Heights in the 50s and 60s don't know how multiracial we were. I grew up with Japanese, Jewish, Russian, Latinos, Mexican-American primarily, blacks, just a very multiracial community, and one that really cared for each other in that, you know, we grew up in a neighborhood where people knew each other. In my grandmother's home on my mother's side, I grew up in East LA by Calvary Cemetery. For those that are listening, probably know that area very well. And I remember the people that grew up in the neighborhood were independent owners of upholstery. My grandfather had a construction company. The man next door had a gas station. The man next door, across the street, owned a grocery store. So just very community oriented. On my father's side, they grew up more in Boyle Heights, across from another cemetery there as well. Again, a community that was at that time very independent, very caring. So I was very blessed to be in a very loving community, on both sides of my grandparents.
So here we are at the historic college, ELAC, East Los Angeles College, which has been the stepping stone for many leaders here in the community. So many great programs, the largest college in California, highest transfer rates to some of the universities, and many exceptional programs. And you are an ELAC graduate,
Yes.
so why was a woman at that time, how did you make it to be an educator? I mean, that was tough.
Well, again, I think for me at that time, it was during the 60s, during racial unrest, riots, things like that. And I knew that if I wanted to do more in my life, nothing wrong with my family, they were, they did well, but I wanted more. And so I decided to go to college. I unfortunately, and I say this with all respect for parochial schools, but at that time I went to a parochial school that was not supportive of the students who from East LA were attending that school. And so I wasn't given the support that I needed to say, could I have gone to a four-year university? They didn't talk to us, even though I was in a college prep course. I don't know why, but they just looked at the students from East LA should not be at that school. So with that, I decided to attend East LA College. I was the first in my family to attend a college. And financially for me as well. I didn't have the resources to even apply, make applications.
And that's one of the things that keeps Chicano, Mexican-American, Latino students out is finances. Isn't that correct?
Absolutely. But one of the things that I know about myself is that I'm very persistent, and I was probably one of the few of my friends that graduated in 2 years. Because most people that I went to school with, 3 years, 4 years, they left, they came back, which is fine. They all ended up doing well. One of my good friends ended up being a social worker and ended up being an attorney. They did it at their own time. I often say to my students, you'd run your race at your pace. And so I ran my pace like a sprint. I wanted to finish, go to Cal State LA, and then begin my teaching career, and that's what I did.
Now, you've been a superintendent in a number of schools, and so for those of our audience who don't know Dr. Robles, she was actually in Utah as a superintendent for 8 years, the first and I think the only Chicana that's ever been a superintendent in that district.
At that time, I was the only woman out of 40 superintendents.
Right.
It was a great experience. Prior to that, I was superintendent of Montebello Unified School
Montebello,
District,
correct.
and I saved the district from being taken over by the state. And things politically happened, and I said, I don't need to be here. I'm just going to move. And so I went to Salt Lake City.
Right.
Had a great 8 years. The best part before I left is I was able to participate in the Winter Olympics, and so I find it a joy. But the district at that time actually recruited me, the search firm, because the district was going through those demographic changes that many districts had gone through in LA prior to that time. And the board was very supportive of my efforts, and I think that's why I was able to stay 8 years before I returned home to become superintendent of LA County Office of Education.
Wow. Let's talk about some of the stories of your students. I know as a former teacher, my proudest story is one of my students became a community college president, and I'm just lucky that I was blessed and honored to have her in my classroom since she was 11.
Yes.
And to see her president of a Hispanic Serbian institution was, wow, that was like something amazing. So let's talk about some of those student stories.
Oh, gosh.
I know there's a lot of them. I know.
Well, one I'm going to share recently what happened to me about 2 weeks ago. I live close here in Whittier, and our Whittier area was having an art show, which was a bi-national art show with Calexico and Mexicali, where my family was from originally. And I'm standing there with my husband and others, and a young man comes up to me, and he said, "Mrs. Robles." And I looked at him, I didn't recognize him, and usually I can recognize some of my former students. And he said, "You were my principal at Washington Elementary School." Now, this was in the 80s. It's 2024, a long time. And I started talking to him, and we were talking about different things that he was doing. Afterwards, my friend, Tony Hernandez, who was originally talking to this young man, said to me that when he was speaking to him, that he stopped, just looked at my friend. He said he was like in a glaze, and he stopped, and that's when he ran over to me, and he told my friend that he recognized me because of my smile. And so I always remember this, is that what we have to do as educators is care about our kids, love them, show that we love them, care. I saw a bumper sticker recently that said, "Kindness is free," and it is. And there's nothing more that children want is to be embraced and loved and cared by the people in their lives in school.
And I know that you've worked with some of the neediest kids, gangbangers, kids from single-family homes, foster homes, and you're absolutely right. And I think I've mentioned this before, that a colleague of ours, Dr. Angela Valenzuela, who's a professor at the University of Texas at Austin, wrote a book a number of years ago called The Politics of Care. And she says you have to love Mexican-American children before you can teach them. Isn't that so true?
It sounds so basic, right? Why do you go to education? You go into education because you love children and you want to make a difference. You want to educate them. You want them to be able to get the skills and knowledge so they can be whatever they want to be when they grow up, and they can thrive. And that's why we go into it. So not having that piece of care and understanding where they are just doesn't make sense to me. But unfortunately, there are a few that go in for it. I know it's not the money that they're going for, but they're going for a reason. But kids, a good friend of mine shared with me about 30 years ago, a child doesn't care how much you know until he knows how much you care.
Oh, that's...
And once you have them and they know they'll do just about anything for you at any age. I worked in a juvenile hall court when I was starting out. They just want to know that we cared about them. Being curious about their background, being curious about what they want in their lives, having them tell their story to you without me lecturing to them. And they did anything I wanted them to do in juvenile hall. They wanted to show to me that they wanted to prove how proud I was of them, that they had reason for me to be proud.
And that's really an important point, that kids, if you challenge them, I had a teacher that Chicana that taught the alternative students, right? Alternative students are usually the ones that haven't been successful, and so they're put in this class as a last opportunity. And I had a complaint from one of the teachers that she says, "Look at this. These kids are writing about los tres little cholitos. We're reinforcing the negative. We're reinforcing the gangs, the lowriders." I said, "I think it's wonderful." I said, "These kids read their essays. They're amazing." So I went back to the teacher and I gave them an award for involving their kids in something that was productive. And she told me a really funny story. She says, and she was pregnant at the time. She says, "Yeah, I had to tell my kids, you can't hang around in my classroom today because I got to go buy some tires." And they said, "Hey, Mrs. A, don't worry about it, man. We'll get tires for your car. What size? What do you need them?" But the kids were genuinely honest, and they protected her. Anything she needed, they were there. If there was a fight, you know, they protected her, nothing would happen to her, but that's exactly what you're talking about. You know, we got to love these kids if we're going to be educators, right?
Absolutely, because they have, when I think of some of our children, particularly our immigrant families, when I think about what they have gone through to be here, I think about our middle school students that were immigrant kids, and they come to us maybe not having gone to school, and they even go to high school. I think how brave they are. High school for any student that's from the United States, and they go, it's scary enough.
Right.
Adolescence,
Right.
hormones, all of that. And here these young people come in, no English, they come in, they don't know anybody. I give them the Courage Award because I don't know that I would have done it at 15.
Right.
I wouldn't know that. I'd say, never mind, I'm just going to wait and sit back. They're courageous enough to say, I'm going to come in and I'm going to do what I need to do and I'm going to learn. I give them the Courage Award because I don't know how else they do it other than they really care about improving their lives and their families. So I give them a lot of credit.
Now, you came from very humble background. So what would you say to parents, students, or just our viewers about education and the importance of education being a way out?
You know, my advice to as a parent myself and to others is that your children need to know that they are number one in your life. You're busy, I know, I was busy, but that you're going to be there for them no matter what. You're going to love them no matter what, and that you're going to encourage them to be what they want to be. You may not be able to give them the resources, but the love is what matters. You know, just hugging them, caring for them, inspiring them, encouraging them to do their best, and they'll do it. They need to be loved. My brother, who recently passed away, used to say to me, you know, what my mother would. I live with my mother, and she's 94, and throughout my career, she's lived close by to me, and she would always say, "Oh, you look so beautiful, Mija. You look so beautiful." My brother goes, "Yeah, go out there without your makeup and see how beautiful you look, darling." But I just know that my mother loves me no matter what I do or say, and that support for me has been the lifeline for me to do whatever I want. When I went to Salt Lake, all of my friends were saying, "You can't leave us, you stay here." And my mother knew about the difficulties that I was having with this board, and I lived right next to her. And she said something that stayed with me. She said, "I want to know that Darlene is happy, and she's going to be there and be successful, than me living next door to her, and I'm not being able to help her and support her." So she was willing to say, "Go, Mija, go. Do what you need to do, because you're going to be happy." And that's what we do to our kids, that you're going to be there to support them when whatever decision they make, good ones and bad ones, we're going to be there for them.
Well, thank you so much. As we wind down, I want to thank Dr. Darlene Robles. What a great story. A great individual, someone that I highly respect. We've been in the same profession for many years and colleagues. And so this is Dr. Jose Leyba. I want to close out with giving a big shout out to the president of ELAC, Dr. Alberto Roman, and also the facilities director, Mr. Burnett. They have been wonderful in hosting us here today. And you have some beautiful artwork by Vidal Herrera, and we're going to continue LA Barrio Stories. So stay tuned, LA Barrio Stories and Latino USA TV. This is Dr. Jose Leyba signing off. Hasta la próxima vez y viva la raza. Stay tuned.